Hi, this is Josh from Manhattan Edit Workshop, bringing you Sight, Sound, and Story live, making it work from assistant editor to editor. It is August 25th, just about 5 p.m., and I'm broadcasting from our office where we had our first in-person class in about, I'm going to say, a year and a half, and it was amazing to see students and a teacher across the hall from me doing what we've been doing for so long. It just made me feel like maybe things are headed back to some semblance of normalcy. So I was very, very happy to see it. And, I think one of the benefits of, there are many bad things that happen because of the pandemic, but one of the good things is we got to give sort of regular monthly events during that time, some from Jason Banky's backyard, some from upstate New York, and hopefully more in the future that would be live and with a live audience and the way we've been accustomed to doing it for a long time. But it's a good indication here so far what I'm seeing over at Manhattan Edit Workshop. So excuse that little aside as we start today's event. I'd like to thank AJA, OWC, and American Cinema Editors who are doing Edit Fest Global this weekend. So hopefully you have gotten emails about that. If you haven't, why don't you go and Google Edit Fest and you'll see a number of other panels happening this weekend with them. I'd like to thank Jason Banky and Janet Dalton, who are here. You can't see them or hear them, but they're here making all of this hard work look easy and making it so that I can really just pop on and do my thing and bring you the event without any technical issues. That said, we've been fairly lucky in the past with not having a ton of technical problems. And every once in a while we do. And so if tonight's one of those times, we'll do our best to fix it as quickly as possible. We hardwire our things whenever we can. Sometimes Wi-Fi is great. Sometimes, as you may know out there, it's not. But we're confident that we'll do all right. And if we do have any problems, you'll know about it, and we'll be quick to try to fix it. You'll also notice there's a chat box on the side of the Vimeo event. If you sign in there, you can ask questions. We encourage it. We'll leave time at the end of tonight's event for questions to the panel, but feel free to put them in there and let us know if you'd like your name mentioned. We can also just ask them anonymously if you prefer not to. I think those are all the ground rules. If it was in a live event, I would say turn off your cell phones, but it doesn't really matter because you're home, and if it goes off, that's your problem. So I'm going to, without any further ado, bring you guys our panel for tonight. It's Making It Work from Assistant Editor to Editor. Our moderator, Maya Mumma, come on in, and our panelists, Carla Gutierrez, Grace Mendenhall, Ted Raviv, and Samali Bikangaga. I think I got them all right. Let me know later if I did anything wrong with the names, but I think I actually got them pretty good. I was rehearsing a little tiny bit. I'm gonna let you guys take it from here. Have a great event, and I'll be back to sign off at the end of the evening, and have a great time, guys.
Thank you, Josh. Hi, everyone. I'm Maya. I work with the Karen Schmier Film Editing Fellowship, and we have a couple programs that provide year-long mentorship to editors within the documentary community. And these are people from a variety of backgrounds and experience levels, everything from AE to emerging editor to editor. And that's why I'm really excited here to have these edit teams together to talk about their process and talk about their own experiences of growing or having grown into an editor in our documentary editing world. We have two teams here. First is Grace Mendenhall and Carla Gutierrez, who worked on the documentary film Pray Away, which premiered on Netflix earlier this month. And we have Ted Raviv and Samali Bikangaga, who worked on the upcoming Muhammad Ali multi-part documentary that's going to be premiering on PBS in just a few weeks in September. So first off, I'd just love to hear from each of you about how you got your start in the documentary editing world and kind of what brought you into it. And let's start in alphabetical order for this one, and then we'll have more of a discussion. So Carla, tell me how you kind of got into this world.
We're going by first name, alphabetical order. Yes.
First name, yes, first name alphabetical, yes.
So I went to film school. That was my entry into production and editing. I knew I wanted to make documentaries, and I quickly realized that editing was my favorite part of the process. But I got my access through that. And I debated a lot between going to film school or just learning by doing, like, finding a assistant production position. And I decided that, I always did pretty well at school, so I decided to go that route. But I know that it works very different for different people. After school, I did end up, being mentored by somebody with a lot more experience. And to me, that was a huge part of my education. So mentorship has always been an important aspect of the craft.
And Grace, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the first film I worked on with Carla was RBG, and that was really a big moment for me. I had just moved to New York. I actually first reached out to the film after seeing a Facebook advertisement looking for a production assistant. And so I responded and was a production assistant for a day, and then saw that they were looking for an assistant editor, and sent probably an annoying amount of emails to the directors of that film, Julie Cohen and Betsy West, just being like, hey, I can edit too. I would love to participate. I would love to take part. And they really took a chance on me. And that was kind of, I had done editing before that, but that was really my entry point to documentary editing. And assistant editing is so different than editing itself. And it was just really like a whole big learning experience for me. Googling all of that technical stuff, and like, it was just, this educational masterclass, and being able to do that and having Carla editing on that project, like, that became a really important working relationship to me. And so from there, it was continuing on projects with Carla and with other people on that team. And that was really, RBG was really my entry point. And from there, it's been just the kindness and generosity of the people around me too, bringing me onto other projects.
Thank you. Samali, tell us about your journey.
Yeah, well, I studied journalism at college, and my focus was visual storytelling. I originally wanted to be a photojournalist, and I ended up taking a documentary class and just kind of fell in love with that department. And my professor, she produced a lot of documentaries that focus on women's rights and policing and gender issues. And she really took me under her wing at the time. I got to kind of observe her storytelling style through the edit of a doc she was working on at the time. And from then on, I fell in love with the process of documentary editing. My second internship was with Florentine Films, and that's where I learned how to pull selects, and I actually met Ted during that internship. And I remember he was working on special effects for the Vietnam series, and I thought oh my God, this is so cool. And it was just I think we had a week together, and I just really thought it was just kind of amazing, weaving all these different elements of storytelling together. And yeah.
And Ted, tell us about you.
So when I was younger, I wanted to be a screenwriter in narrative filmmaking. And then my parents brought me to see Hoop Dreams and Capturing the Freedmans, among other documentaries in the 90s. And that really started my love for documentary. My first experience in editing was a student film. I studied film in college, just like Carla. But my professional start was with an internship at Florentine Films, which is the production company of Ken Burns up in New Hampshire. And That was my first experience being in an edit room, being on Avid day in, day out, engaging with the timeline, a project. And I just loved it. And with the, support and generosity of a lot of the editors who were working above me, I was able to grow from an intern to apprentice to assistant, and then editor, with actually one more stop in between there as an associate editor. And so it's been a really great journey for me, thanks to a lot of people.
Great, thank you all. So we have two teams here, and we're going to talk to each of them as well and talk about the edit room and the dynamics on each of their projects. And we're going to see a clip from each of them as well too, and talk through that. I want to start with the Pray Away team, Carla and Grace. And I know every documentary film has a different dynamic. It has a different team. It all depends on a million, I think, different factors of, it could be budget, it could be topic, it could be all sorts of different things that determine how the team comes together. So Carla and Grace, you would both work together on RBG. Can you tell me about how Pray Away came together, and what the edit was like, and what the dynamic between the two of you were, what the needs of the film called for, and how you all work together through this project?
Grace, you want to start? I'd love to hear your take on it.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember how it all came together, really. I mean, more what stands out to me is the dynamic in the edit room, I think. It was just like from the start, it was a really, I don't know, just kind of like an intimate experience. Like we were working at Carla at your house, and the director would be there, and like we would all be sitting in the same room, just like having these conversations about the edit. It's one of the first times I think I'd been like just really in it. Like it just felt like it was all happening in the same room, and the director was just like so involved in the conversations about the edit that felt like this really kind of special, special like creative environment, like everyone just throwing around these ideas. And I felt like I could really see how everything morphed into what it became. I always felt very like in touch with the film as an associate editor on that project.
Yeah, I think that if I remember correctly, so Grace came as an assistant editor first, and then about like probably like 4 or 5 months into the edit, she came on as a full-time associate editor, and it was one of those situations where I had worked with her already, and we had built a really strong rapport with RBG. I mean, she edited a couple of scenes there for that film, and I was able to see and really kind of enjoy the development of Grace's voice as an editor, and by the end of RBG, Grace, I know that definitely for Pray Away and the latest film that we work on together, Julia, Grace's eyes are the first eyes that see my first pass at things. And it's like, it's become like this kind of relationship where I just love to get her feedback first. And I think that, I hope, Grace, for you, like being part of that, not only like me giving you feedback, but also you participating in my process from really, really early on, from like, just choosing selects and putting selects in some kind of like arc form, and then like talking about like the potentials of like, what's really jumping out, to like create a tighter arc. I really hope that you're learning through that process as well. And I saw something really beautiful with Grace was really her grow in tackling verite scenes. And that's one of the things that happened with Pray Away. Like we gave her like one of the most difficult scenes to just tackle it. And obviously we had a lot of conversations about where that scene fit into the story. But for the people that have seen Pray Away, and if you haven't seen it, please like go to Netflix and watch it. it's an all veritas scene. It's one of the most intense, like emotionally intense scenes. It's a prayer session with people that are going through conversion therapy, who believe that they are changing, and it's just that the scene is like incredibly, it was really difficult to put together, to really like grab the essence of the moment, because you're seeing people that are like like hoping, that are desperate for the change, that they're asking God for the change. And that scene had to be crafted in such a way that it will lead into kind of the consequences of that hope, which, presented itself with self-harm for one of our characters. And so this is like a very difficult scene to put together, and she did it. I only came on into like to do a polish at the scene at the very, like, the very end of the process. So this is after having worked with Grace, in just one film, and just having seen her grow, we gave her one of the most difficult scenes in Pray Away. She got it. It was
That's
just
awesome.
really amazing to see. Yeah.
We're gonna show this clip in just a second. Grace,
Oh,
can
okay.
you? Yeah.
Right, in detail.
No, it's okay.
Great.
You set it up. You set it up great. And
Okay.
what I think is really interesting is, I think maybe people who are just starting out in documentary editing, they see the editor's chair as something incredibly far away. And what we're talking about today a lot is about how kind of the mentorship and the work between the AE and the associate editor, the editor, how that kind of grows and how everybody contributes to the film as well. So I'm really excited today. We're showing clips that Grace edited and also that Samali edited as well too. And we're going to talk about those. So Grace, can you just set up a teeny bit? Carla set up the film a bit. Can you set up the film just a bit more, and then
Yeah, so Pray Away itself is about the ex-gay movement. And if you want to learn more about that, there's certainly like a lot out there, but just to give a really basic understanding, it follows the leaders of the ex-gay movement, who believe that you can, if you have once been gay, if you've once been homosexual, you can leave that behind. And the film follows these leaders who have come out of that movement and talk about where they are in their lives now. And it's very different places than where the film starts. And as part of that journey, you also hear from someone named Jeffrey, who you'll see in this scene, who is part of, I don't know if it would use the same words, Carla, maybe you can help me out, but is part of this like freedom march movement, this like similar ethos. And the scene the film follows Jeffrey, and this scene places him as he's about to hold a freedom march. And this is the scene shows the preparation for that march, and bringing people around him, and the community all comes together for this moment. Carla, I don't know if you want to jump in and add to that.
This is so this protagonist in the film is he is a continuation of the ex-gay movement, and how the form that is taking on now. And we mostly showed scenes of him in verite form with a little bit of voiceover. So that's the scene.
Great. So we're gonna watch the clip with everybody now, and enjoy this clip from Pray Away, and we'll be right back to talk about it.
Oh my gosh, look who it is. 3 of my favorite people. Who are you, boy? Oh my gosh, what took y'all so long? How you feeling, man? This is Ecclesia. This is the church. The article from yesterday is like going through the roof. People from all over the country are clicking on it. Yes. word's getting out there. Amen. It's blowing up. Yes, I love that. Hey y'all, we're about to start worship. They're about to start worship. While I was here in 2017 was when the thought came to me, we need to have a march for people who left LGBTQ lifestyles. The Freedom March is just all about y'all's stories. It's not just about my story. It's about celebrating all your stories. Also, the Lord put on my heart to say, be obedient in whatever he tells you. When you step out in obedience once, he'll trust you more and more and more, and you will just continue to grow. And a lot of times it's the little things. He watches us on at home, the little things. Are you being obedient with something he tells you little? And not just a big ministry thing. It's just every day being obedient, because he said those that love him will obey him.
I want you guys to understand what's happening. This is the sound of unity. This is the sound of a warrior. That means business. Woo!
Okay, we're back. Grace. So you came on this project as an AE and moved up to an associate editor, and you're given a scene to cut. Did you know at the time that the scene was challenging when you took it on? And kind of how did you approach the scene, and kind of as someone who is also learning, what was your process with Carla and with the rest of the team in building the scene and figuring it out?
Yeah, I mean, the whole film, I think, felt really challenging from an editing perspective, but also from a personal perspective. It's really intense material. I'm queer, and it was really intense, the whole process of watching the material and going through the edit. And so I think that brought with it just a real sensitivity and attention in the edit room to every scene and every stage of the process. And so before I started editing this scene, we had a big conversation together about where it fits in to the story. And with Jeffrey, it felt really important. He feels alone sort of at the beginning of the film. And this is the first time you really see him surrounded by this community and people, and you feel this momentum building. And a lot of our conversation was just like, Grace, like, how can we build this momentum? Like, what does momentum look like, not only within the scene in terms of the pacing of the cuts, but what is momentum of like this scene as a scene in a whole series of scenes? And so we had a lot of conversations about context before starting. And then for me, it was really like pulling the chunks that I knew needed to be in there, these sort of significant moments. And once I had the significant moments, these things that felt really important to establish as part of the conversation. This is also the first time you're introduced really to like what the Freedom March is going to be. And so having those little markers in line allowed me to build around that. So once that was there, we would talk through and I would say like, I have these bones, I have this radio cut, like, and then from there, it was really finding ways of being like, how can we show and not tell this? Like, how can we translate this fight where someone is saying something important and like demonstrate that in how their relationships look with each other, you know, how are they interacting with each other? And so that was kind of the back and forth process between me and between Carla and between the director of how, yeah, it was just like a really good lesson in like how to show rather than tell, like how powerful that can be. And so that was my beginning approach. And then it was just really about like getting to this big moment with the music and the feeling and the emotion and like showing this kind of passion and figuring out that build of cuts and pacing within the scene itself.
Yay. Well, I'm glad you got the opportunity to work on
Yeah.
that. Yeah. I want to talk to the Muhammad Ali team also. So Samali and Ted. So Samali, I know this, so it's a multi-part documentary, 4 parts, 2 hours each part. So it's massive. Tell me about the kind of the edit team dynamic, how you came into it and what that whole world was like when you entered it.
Sure. So I actually started at Florentine, as I said, as an intern, and they hired me on for Eastlake Meadows, which was a feature-length documentary about the history of public housing. And from there, I went from apprentice to assistant, and they liked me enough so I could stay on for the Muhammad Ali series. And so the edit was about, and correct me if I'm wrong, about 18 months. It was 4 episodes for 4 editors. There was 2 apprentice editors, and I was the lead assistant on the project. And Muhammad Ali is an icon of the 20th century. So, and he's also probably like one of the most photographed figures in history at this point. So Archival Organization was super key to this project, making sure that everything was logged, making sure all the dates were, correct, and just staying on top of project organization so that the editors can kind of sift through what they need for each of their episodes. And when we started, it was about halfway into the project when COVID hit. And so all of us had to go work remote, as you may know. And so all the assistants in the edit room kind of had to come up with like a new workflow as to kind of tackling this enormous project together in a remote setting. So once we figured that out, we were able to, assist the editors in all of their needs. So yeah, media management was super crucial. Logging the archival footage and organizing the Avid project. We created, bins and folders by theme. So boxing, civil rights, Vietnam, everything that was going on during that time. Logged footage by subject matter, theme, and per episode, which was very helpful for the editors to kind of narrow stuff down. Pulled selects, created sync maps for all the fights, many fights that Ali was in, obviously using multicam for like the different broadcasts. Script sync, music was very important on this project to reflect the time period, the mood. And yeah, so I would say being on top of archival footage was very key for this film. And this particular scene that we're about to show is from episode 3, which is called The Rivalry. And it's when Muhammad Ali faces Joe Frazier after his 3-year exile to regain the heavyweight title. And Ted,
Cool.
if you want to add anything else?
Yeah, Ted, I'm actually curious, kind of on a large project like this, kind of what, as an editor and working with multiple editors, what that kind of dynamic is with the AEs as well. And often on these larger projects, or on several projects, there isn't necessarily room. There's so much to manage, so much media to manage, so many things to do. Like, how do you create space? How did you create space on this project to have Samali actually work on a scene at some point too? So I'd love to hear your perspective as one of the editors on it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, 4 editors working remotely with decades and decades of archival, tens of thousands of photographs. So a lot to manage, and a lot of that fell on Samali's shoulders. She was really the glue to hold it all together. And it's a lot. And like you said, that is a challenge to be able to have the time for assistants and apprentices to be able to do creative work, which I think is so important. And we have to find ways to try and carve that out, whether that's coming from the edit team or the producing team, or both working together to make that more of the norm. But on this project, I was looking, I knew I wanted to give Samali a scene, and was looking through the script, and I thought this would be a good one to do on your own, because it was kind of a little bit of an island, right? We're meeting Larry Holmes for the first time, and it's foreshadowing something that happens later. I won't say too much, but it's his only appearance in the show, and so it felt like a good scene for a one-off to have some ownership over, and to be able to have a beginning, middle, and end, even though it's only 3 or 4 minutes long. So I was able to set that aside and be in touch with Samali about her availability, even though she was juggling all this stuff. And luckily we were able to fit something in before a screening, and have some note sessions back and forth, and have her be able to knock it out of the park for the directors.
Cool. Okay, so let's watch the clip that Samali edited from episode 3 of Muhammad Ali.
One day, while Ali was training in a makeshift gym near the half-built camp, a 22-year-old amateur fighter from nearby Easton, Pennsylvania, named Larry Holmes, showed up, eager to meet his idol. One of 12 kids raised by his mother, Flossie, in public housing on Easton's south side. Holmes had first boxed for hot dogs and sodas in the city's Wednesday night bar fights at just 10 years old.
When I left school, I was in the 7th grade. It was either quit or get thrown out. Therefore, I just decided to go. I worked in the car wash. I wore shine shoes. I did whatever I can do to help bring in money to the house. And then I met a guy by the name of Ernie Butler, teaching kids how to box. And I started learning how to box.
By the time Holmes arrived at Deer Lake, he was hoping to make the Olympic team.
Ali put up his hand, he said, "Let me see your jab." And Larry's sitting there. So, "Oh, that's good." And I said, "Larry, do you have your boxing stuff?" "Yeah, I have it." Well, he said, "Good, I need a good workout." So we go down and they spar. And Larry got a shiner. And I said, "Larry, let me put some ice on this." No. I'm going back to Easton. I'm going to tell all the people, Muhammad Ali put this here. I'm so proud of this. And then I invited Larry to our training camp. I would come in here and wash dishes in the kitchen. I would sit in the dressing room and talk to him and ask him questions, and he probably got tired of me asking a lot of questions, but I did it anyway. The quickness and the mobility that he had. He could duck, go away from punches and stuff, block, pick. You couldn't hit him.
Hello again, everyone. I'm Howard Cosell, along with Muhammad Ali, bringing you the Olympic boxing trials, and you'll be seeing Larry Holmes.
A lot of the stuff that Ali did, I copied. And everybody said, "You're a copycat." Okay, so, and what's next?
It reminds me of myself in footwork, the way he's constantly moving and circling, but I don't...
I'm gonna learn from the best. This man is the best, so I'm gonna copy it.
Good left by Holmes.
If I can't get it, at least I gave him a shot. But I've worked it out pretty good.
Holmes failed to make the Olympic team, but continued training with Ali at Deer Lake, eventually beginning a professional career that would one day lead him back to his mentor.
Samali, can you tell me when you were given the scene, and you were kind of juggling your world of AE work, how did you find that balance? Did you have the space and time to work on that scene, or were you working through kind of how to do both jobs at once, or how did you manage that on such a large project?
Sure. Well, to answer your question, if I had time for it, I guess I made time for this scene. There was a lot of juggling going on between the archival logging and kind of, fulfilling editor requests for each episode. But during the week, I kind of just ended up splitting up my time during the day. Like, okay, like in the morning, I'll focus on episode 1, afternoon, I focus on episode 2, or, the rest of the day I'll work on the scene. Maybe that included like working on a Saturday or, Sunday morning or something like that. But this is a scene that I had a lot of fun working on, because, Larry Holmes is like this aspiring young boxer that really looks up to Ali and plays a pretty important role in episode 4. And the foreshadowing and the kind of just, like little island that, Ted had mentioned of it in this huge series was just different than anything else in the show. So I just made time for it. And, Ted taught me a lot about narration and documentary storytelling and how important pacing is, especially in this particular film. And we were in constant communication. Like he would, always Slack me or ask like, "Oh, are you busy? Like how's your day or week looking like?" And I'm like, I'm available. I'm ready. I'll make time. And so we would go back and forth. Like I'd first kind of lay down the narration, determine the pacing. We'd go over it over Zoom, because we were remote at the time, and he'd make corrections or tell me, like, "Oh, this pan's too slow," or, "Fix the eye level here." We picked out stills used to describe Larry Holmes' hometown and upbringing. In this particular scene, actually, we were lacking in archival footage to just, he didn't really provide any early years photographs and stuff like that. So I had to be a little bit creative and use archival footage that we pulled of like Black life in the 50s and 60s. And so found home footage of some Black kids boxing in Philly and used that to propel the story forward. We also used the Olympic boxing trials, and I kind of chose that to show their boxing relationship between Ali and Holmes. It's just awesome that he was there ringside with Cosell, like, meanwhile, not knowing this kid is just going to show up at his camp many years later. And one of the things I also enjoyed was determining the music of the scene. Ted kind of picked out a bunch of tracks that reflected the time and the mood of the scene that we wanted to go for. And out of those tracks, I picked what I thought would work best. And we used like archival sound effects to get the feel of Deer Lake and the home gym and Larry boxing and the Olympic trials. And yeah, I mean, I had a lot of fun working on this. It was just like a fun light scene. And yeah, it was great.
Awesome. Yeah, that definitely shows. And okay, I'm going to open this up kind of to everybody again, but Ted, actually, I wanted to follow up with you. And what you were saying earlier about kind of making that space and is something really important. I want to ask you, and this, I go open it up to everybody too, but what do you look for in an AE when you're working? What are the both the skills, but kind of qualities of what kind of creates a kind of a strong working relationship?
I think the first thing is I think the level of care is hugely important. And I think clear communication is extremely important. And the desire to learn, and you know, someone who asks questions. I think a lot of people are scared to ask questions, but I think that's a sign that you want to make sure you get something right and that you're eager to learn. And so I really appreciate that. And these are all, you know, definitely qualities that Samali carries.
Great. Carla, anything to follow up on that? Oh, unmute.
I failed to describe the film and unmute myself. So I really want to underline and emphasize what Ted just said. I think it's the eagerness to learn and to ask questions. It's incredibly important. I remember meeting Grace for the first time. Grace, remember? I remember I ate like an apple tart or something. And our conversation was mostly like, I really wanted to work with somebody that wanted to learn the craft and wanted to be present and wanted to be there when we had discussions about story. Because as she said, you know, you can only talk about one specific scene when you understand what do you need that scene to do in the overall picture of the entire story. So you know, conversations about structure and about the entire narrative arc, like being part of that, like to me, that's one of the most essential aspects of learning the craft. And I had worked with assistants that were not interested in being in the room with those conversations were taking place. There were people that really wanted to just do the technical work, which is great, and you know, but I really wanted to work and desired to work with somebody that, you know, wanted to be present and wanted to learn the craft. So that's incredibly important to me.
Great. And Grace and Samali, what do you like in an editor? What are you looking for in those edit room dynamics also? Because that's key too.
Samali, you want to start us off?
Oh, sure. What do I look for? Communication. I definitely like someone who's open. I felt that Ted and I mean, when we were, you know, pre-COVID, he would invite me into like his edit suite and just ask me and the apprentice, you know, like, how do you feel about this song? Like, how does it make you feel like in this scene? Or how does this photo, like, what are you learning from here? And I loved that because he, you know, it's just an interest in your creative opinion. And that felt very supportive, not intimidating, but it's supportive, just to even be heard, I guess. And so that's really important to me, is just communication and support, advocating for your AEs, like in terms of boundaries and workload, you know, checking in, making sure that their mental health is okay, that they're not stretched too thin. Ted did a lot of that, which I was very appreciative of. Yeah, just open to kind of mentorship, I think is very important.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think mentorship takes a lot of time and effort and intention. And so I was really looking for that. I get just like someone who was really generous with their time and was willing, you know, just like you're saying, to bring you into the conversation and to open up the creative process to you is huge. I mean, it just, someone advocating for your presence in the room felt really important. Like the AE needs to be here right now. Like that is really huge. And so, yeah, so for me, like that's what was really exciting to me about, again, like Carla, you were saying, like meeting for the first time, I was really eager to learn, but also Carla was like, I really want to share this knowledge, and having that willingness to share it is really important.
Thank you for all of that. I'm curious what I think people see this growth from AE to editor. There's kind of steps and very different experiences in between. And I'm wondering if any of you have seen or experienced kind of obstacles to that. I know a lot of people find that transition challenging. I know that Grace and Samali are both moving up from AE into associate editor, which is kind of there's lots of different there's associate editor, junior editor, co-editor, there's all these kind of different words floating around out there. And what are the biggest challenges that you all have experienced or seen in the industry to kind of that growth and that pipeline? Anybody? Yeah.
I can jump in. I think mostly time and the pressures of the work, all the technical stuff that has to be done in the amount of times, and, schedules are shifting quite a bit for editors. And I think that's, it's not allowing for the kind of mentorship that created the most amazing editors, the veteran editors that we would think of today, that we all want to work with and learn from. When Grace and I started working on the Julia Child documentary, which is the latest film that we worked together on, Grace was ready to tackle a lot more. And that was just a situation where the amount of archival was just so vast. And our producers are amazing producers. And I wish I had raised that kind of obstacle and maybe ask for a little bit more assisting support, because Grace came in as an associate editor already, but she just didn't have enough time to tackle as many scenes as she was completely ready to do. And you see that a lot, I think, in series. I'm interviewing for series, and the number of weeks that I'm hearing about in docuseries, it's just it just makes me think, how can you possibly have the time and the space to do the type of mentorship, and also the space and the time for the assistant editors to try their hands on a scene, and also to be able to revise that scene, because that's where the learning really happens, to be able to take notes, and a second chance to, because you're never going to get it. I mean, I don't ever get a scene right the first time I edit it. So it's from, failing and working at it, and learning the lessons of that first fail pass at a scene, that you're learning and you're getting to the good scenes, right? So time, space, time, and schedules. That's a big issue.
Yeah, I'll also jump in and say, I feel like there's a thing that I find in projects sometimes where the AE will come on to set up the project and then be asked to leave for so many legitimate reasons, budget, scheduling, it's even harder with everything being remote. That's this whole other hurdle. But for me, the most mysterious part of the edit was how it starts, how you go from nothing to anything. And so I feel like I really grew on the edits where they let me stay after setting up the project, and I was able to assist in other ways at the beginning and support the editor and just be there. Made a big difference for me too. And it's always a little bit tougher when they just bring you in for AE work and then ask you to leave after the AE work. It's really nice to be able to stay with something and see it through.
Any other thoughts? I think to kind of bring this all together too, I think one of the dynamics that we talk about, Carla, you mentioned that, there's so much work, there's schedules, there's all sorts of things. How can we as editors and in the editing community work to kind of create more space for mentorship that allows and gives AEs room to grow and learn? And is it just us, or what do we need from the other people working on the projects? What do we need from directors and producers and streamers? I know this is a big question, but does anybody have thoughts on kind of what we need to do moving forward to kind of create these spaces so that we're growing and continuing to grow the talent pool within the documentary community, and making sure that people are having access to projects where they can grow and really learn and contribute to the films? Anybody have thoughts on that? Yeah, Carla.
I can jump in too,
Yeah.
but I think it's, you know, it's what Ted mentioned earlier, you know, it's communication between the edit teams and the lead editors and really the producers. You know, I mean, there are definitely limitations in our industry. Like an independent production is not going to be able to afford maybe, you know, having an assistant editor stay through the duration of the project. But there is, you know, there's been such a big change and so much money coming into, you know, documentaries because of the success we're having and the success of docuseries, that we really need the buy-in from producers. And we need to, you know, I think as a community of editors, learn how to communicate with producers a little bit better, you know, so that like we're all working in coordination with each other to provide this mentorship, which is really affecting kind of like the demand. Like there's such a huge demand for editors right now. I mean, like that's all I hear from producers. That's all I hear from directors, that they're having such a hard time, you know, hiring people that like have the experience that they're looking for. That, you know, I think that there is just an opportunity to provide mentorship because we need a bigger pool of great editors. Like producers are desperate for our talent at this point. So we need the support from productions, especially like well-funded productions, to think about mentorship and to think about the craft as something that, you know, can be taught in a beautiful way, in an organic way that doesn't have to necessarily, you know, require more time or weeks from the production. It could actually really, really help, you know, if you're training somebody that can jump in when like you're dealing with the deadlines and like actually edit a scene and help out with the schedule. Like that's just gonna, you know, benefit the producers and the film itself. And, you know, it doesn't have, yes, you need some time and space to do the right mentorship, but it's also going to really pay off in helping you move the film forward. So yeah, I think we need to just work all together, and for producers to also think about that type of mentorship and how they can benefit and their films can benefit from it.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And also think that, you know, it doesn't, you know, having a scene to cut is fantastic, but also just little things along the way to engage with the timeline creatively. So it's not just the only time I, you know, look at the timeline is to, you know, make a stills in the cut log. It's like, you know, you could do a shot swap or work on a dialogue edit or a music edit or a music change, you know, these little building blocks that are just really instructive to have experience with. And like Carla said, I think that kind of stuff helps everyone. You know, I just hear so many stories about fantastic AEs, people knocking on their door like crazy to work as AEs, but they're going on 5 years as an AE without doing any kind of cutting experience. And that's just so sad to me that that's not, you know, mandated on projects that can afford to foster that kind of growth.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you. Samali, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I completely agree with what Carla and Ted just said. And I think, you know, making the associate editor title more mainstream, bringing that more mainstream, like whether it's union or non-union, because I see that as basically like a more seasoned AE, and that can like bridge the gap between AEs who are also starting out, that are super green and want to learn, but maybe the workload is too much for the first AE to handle, or the editor to even be like a mentor to them. So I almost think that even an associate editor can also kind of guide and help the greener AEs to also, grow as an associate, and then to an editor. And also just that role can also bridge the gap between the technical side of the work and the creative side. So I think it would be great to have that as like a more mainstream title in our industry.
Could I just add something about our initiative? Yeah. So
Yes, please. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So we've been working at the Alliance of Documentary Editors, where we're working on an initiative called BIPOC Doc Editors, and you can find it on bipocdoceditors.com. And it's a database to create more access to BIPOC editors. But what we're proposing to the industry, it is to create, especially those productions that do have the budget, and streamers, and like at every level of productions, to think about creating a position, an associate editor position, and making it standard in the industry, as a way of creating that ladder to learn, and to, for assistant editors to be able to like jump the ladder and then become amazing lead editors. So if you go to our website, you're going to find guidelines, and you're going to find a framework for that, the standard of like an associate editor. And we're hoping that productions and in the industry in general really support that idea, because it again is going to benefit them. And this was the brainchild of like writing what the framework would look like, and specific guidelines for an associate editor position was the brainchild of David Teague, who's working on that initiative too. So please go to the website and download the guidelines if you're a producer. Also, if you're an editor and want to advocate for those ideas, please do that. Visit us there, bipocdoceditors.com.
Thank you, Carla, for that.
Sounding like a corporate.
No, your pitch is great. Yeah. So I'm gonna open it up to some audience questions. I have some here. I'm gonna kind of combine these two because I think these are both interesting. So as AEs, we are mindful of bothering at the editor. Do most editors welcome questions? And also, as an AE, how can I give honest feedback on an editor's cut without overstepping? So both of these are kind of about how that AE can start to kind of navigate that world, and understanding that the editor is, busy. How can they start to build those relationships, or what's the space?
Grace, do you want to?
It's such a good question. I mean, that's like so tough. That's a really hard thing. I've been on projects where it feels really welcome, and I've been on projects where it feels like there's just not the time. And I guess one piece of advice I would give to myself is just like ask more questions when I'm interviewing for a position. Just like understanding a little bit about what the editor or the directors and producers are looking for from that relationship, and just like having that expectation in mind going in. Like now, every time when I'm in an interview, I just like try and make that really explicit. I'm like, this is what I'm looking for. I'm like trying to edit scenes, is that something that I can do here? Like I want to be part of those conversations. Like, is that something you're open to? Because it's really tough once you're in the situation. At least for me, I have a really hard time, I think, like advocating for myself if I feel like it's not being heard. So I would just be really explicit in my interviews, that's kind of my expectation now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Just being fully transparent about your needs as an AE and how you'd like to grow. I think it's really important. I definitely understand, the kind of intimidation. I remember when I first started as an apprentice, I would always look over and see if Algernon was like too busy or like, could I interrupt him? But I kind of just got over that and would just send him messages like, hey, like, do you mind if I like sit down when you're working on the scene? Or, you know, is there like photos you need me to pull? And I just kind of reached out as best as I could. And I was actually very fortunate working on both films for Florentine that I had very open editors. They were always kind of willing to answer my questions or let me sit on something that they were working on. Kind of just like open to that mentorship. So, but I do think it's important to kind of just be fully transparent about your needs and what you'd like to do as an assistant editor.
And I would say for editors, for lead editors, like, you know, I mean, make yourself available. Just tell people that like you will want to hear questions and that you're, you know, you're eager to, you know, share whatever knowledge you have to share. Because, you know, I mean, I remember how when I was younger, how nervous I would get, you know, to approach people and to advocate for myself. So, and I think that most of us have been mentors somehow, you know, we have learned the craft, even if we haven't, you know, learned the craft from like just working under somebody, just by watching their films and learning how they, you know, how they approach stories, how other editors approach stories. So if you're an editor that wants to share your wisdom and your knowledge and what you've learned, let people know, let the assistants and the associate editors that are working with you like know that you're available for them.
Someone asked, how can an AE become an editor without having a mentorship relationship? If someone isn't given that opportunity or in that environment, is there any advice of how to navigate that?
You know, I haven't had this experience, so I can't speak from my own experience, but I'll give it a crack anyway, and you guys can tell me what you think. But I mean, if you can dive in and find projects that will have you, or work on projects that you've shot yourself, and just practice. I mean, I think I would assume it's a harder route to, you know, to have to figure it out on your own rather than learn from the trickle down of years and years of experience. But that would be my assumption, is to just to dive in.
Are there ways for people to also seek that out if they're not in traditional kind of projects too, that allow for that? Any thoughts, Carla?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I remember Jean Shen talking about it at the launch of our initiative. You know, it's like, put yourself out there. I mean, it's hard because you're, you know, you can go to film festivals, you have to try to watch as much as possible, and then create opportunities for you to have access to the people who you admire. Many of them are going to be generous people who are going to like sit down and like, you know, have a conversation with you. So try to create those opportunities. It's also hard to say that because some people just don't have access or don't have, you know, the income level to be able to pay, you know, to go to a festival someplace else. But, you know, just as much as possible, as much as you can, just try to create the opportunities to get to talk to people, to get to hear people in panels. You know, I mean, there is the virtual aspect of, you know, our last 2 years. So listen to people talk about their craft. And if you can have a way to see the process somehow, because that was very instrumental for me to see that like the people that I admire still have to deal with the, you know, the really difficult process of like making a film. It's like really, can I swear? It's like really freaking hard to make a film. And it was very good for me to like see their process, to be able to see the rough cuts and that they're also like failing and learning from those failures to make beautiful films. That it's like beautiful films just don't happen in like 2 weeks, right? And that's a lot of, you can do a lot of learning. So like whatever, audiobooks or anything that can give you a sense of the process behind these beautiful films that look so amazing. Just try to create that access for yourself as much as you can.
I just have one question to kind of wrap this all up, because I know a lot of people who are watching are working on kind of navigating this this relationship and the balance between all these things. Do any of you all have just advice that you would give kind of to yourself, if you could now, when you were starting out, that you think would be helpful, I think, to the people who are watching, something that you've learned now looking back?
I mean, for me, a big struggle has always been self-doubt. And I think that can be crippling sometimes. But as I've grown as an editor, I've kind of come to the realization that some amount of self-doubt is healthy, especially in this role where there's a lot of responsibility and it's challenging. I think that's a sign that you care about the work and respect the role and the story that you're telling. And I don't think if you made a whole documentary without doubting yourself at all, I think that would be a big problem. So I think just relaxing into that self-doubt and know that everyone deals with it, even if people don't speak about it that openly. And that even the most experienced editors, start with a blank timeline and hours and hours of footage and bins, and it's always going to be daunting, but you have to start somewhere, whether it's one shot or one piece of music or one interview, whatever. There's always the undo function and backup sequences, thankfully.
Yeah, I really relate to that. That's a huge struggle for me too. And I think as an associate editor, like one of the things that really holds me back is like just not saying that I'm an editor sometimes. Like I am an editor, and just advocating for myself as an editor has been really hard for me to do, because I think like, well, I have never edited a feature. Like what do I know? So I guess even now I'm like working to believe in myself more and like believe that I'm capable of doing that. Like that can make a big difference in and of itself. Just, especially going from associate editor to editor takes this level of confidence, I think, to say to people like, yeah, I haven't done this before, but like I can do it. I know that I can do it and I have all the pieces. And that's me giving advice to myself currently, but certainly applies, just like knowing it yourself helps others believe it too.
Yeah, I also agree. Self-doubt is getting over that hump is super crucial for your growth as an editor. I also would say like practice, practice on anything you shoot, go edit, find your tribe, just practice on, at home, whether it's like in Avid and Premiere, cut as much as you can and just kind of get comfortable with the software. A lot of times, actually most of the time for AEs, you're dealing with a lot of technical issues. And if you can kind of like, get around the software that takes up most of your day, you can kind of master that and move on to the creative side. I think setting boundaries too, knowing your limits. So often you can make yourself so available to editors and producers because you want to grow and show them that you can take on anything. But it is really important to kind of set those boundaries, make sure that you're not being like used to your full extent. So making sure that you know what you want, and going for it.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I feel like we're all full of doubts, you know, and like Ted said, you need that. Like I think it's like a reflection of the passion that you have, and like, you know, feeling a little scared that you're not going to be able to do justice to the film. It like gives you a drive and a connection to the subject that you know you might not have if you were like overly confident about what you want to do. I would also say one thing that I just have recently started to do, not that many years ago, was really like find community. You know, like I think I worked in isolation, and like I watched a lot of films and I learned from people, but like from the distance. And I think that there's something really nurturing about being able to like have friendships and have you know, relationships with people that you can talk through these things, and you know, it helps you like also, you know, discuss like setting boundaries and being good to yourself, as much as I think like overcommitment to the films, like you need it to be a good editor. But you know, sometimes you face like very toxic situations where you have to think about, you know, myself, or like, oh my God, I'm gonna hurt the film if I leave it, right? Because they've spent a lot of money on like me watching the material. And so it's really, you know, who you surround yourself with, and having that nurturing community, that you can like talk through all this stuff, and also like it, I think, fills you up creatively when you are, you know, in community with people. So go to festivals, meet other editors. Kashmir is such a great place to like create that community for networking, but also like, you know, I mean, I don't want to call it complain, but just like, you know, just kind of like vent a little bit. So yeah, go find your community.
Oh, that's great advice. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Ted and Carla and Grace and Samali. Also, I just want to make sure, Pray Away, everybody go watch it. It's on Netflix. And then Muhammad Ali premieres September 19th?
September
19th on PBS. And everybody should go and watch all of these editors' amazing work, because you all are editors. Yes. So thank you, everyone. And thank you to Manhattan Edit Workshop and Sight, Sound, and Story for hosting this. Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
I grew up in a household in the projects in East Harlem. There's a program at WNET, the public television station, to get more people of color behind the camera, in the editing room, doing sound, writing scripts. When they put me in a dark room and they showed me how to use the splicer and the rewinds, I felt this big sigh of relief, this sense of, wow, I found my space. The editing part of filmmaking is the real nuts and bolts, what makes films come to life. You can ask Spielberg, you can ask Tarantino, you can ask Spike. When you sit here, this is where the proof is in the pudding. I'm Sam Pollard, and this is my class on documentary editing.